Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to this session. Hope you guys are having, good time in this MOSIP Connect 2025. I'm Mohammed Taheer. I work as a cryptography architect in MOSIP for the past more than 5 years. So in this session, we are going to explore about CLIMB 169, right? What is CLIMB 169? So CLIMB 169 is a data format which is being used in the QR codes for representing the identity data. CLIMB 69 is actually a part of CWT, which is CBOR web token. It's a kind of a digitally signed. It's similar to JWT, what we use for auth token purposes. So CLIMB 169 we have registered in IANA, Internet Assigned Number Authority, and as a CLIMB registry which they are maintaining for multiple clients and all for CWT. So why the need of CLIMB 169 is to enhance the interoperability of identity data which can be used in a standardized QR codes. So with this intro of CLIMB 169, let me call up the panel. I'll start with Ameya Bhagwat. He's part of community working group in defining the standards. Nirav Shah, also part of a working group in defining this, CLIMB 169 standards. Jefferies, who has worked on interoperable QR codes. Hello, gentlemen. Good to see you. May I ask you to introduce yourself in brief? Let's start with Ameya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ameya Bhagwat. I am the Chief Revenue Officer at TechFi. We have the privilege to work alongside the partners to contribute to the CLIMB 169. And we will also, during the panel, talk about some of our experience of implementing CLIMB 169 in one of our projects.
Yeah. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nirav Shah from PwC. As Ameya and Taheer mentioned, part of the working group for defining the standards. At the same time, we do a lot of projects in identity systems across the world. So looking forward to sharing some of the experiences on this particular topic.
Sam.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jefferies, and I'm head of the Biometrics and Interoperability Unit at UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency's headquarters in Copenhagen.
Thanks, gentlemen. We'll get started. Let's start with Sam. Sam, tell us about UNHCR's challenges they have faced and why they have decided to adopt VC-based QR codes in the printed ID cards across operations.
Thank you. Yeah, so first of all, UNHCR is the UN Refugee Agency, and we're here to help people who have been forced to flee their homes because of conflicts and persecution. And today there are more than 122 million people who have been forcibly displaced worldwide. UNHCR provides support to states, to governments in more than 136 countries worldwide. And we've been doing refugee registration now for more than 70 years, and biometric enrollment now for almost 25 years. In terms of biometrics, we have more than 7 in every 10 refugees who we're currently looking after biometrically enrolled. And for us, identity should be an asset. It's something which helps us to provide refugee protection. And it should be something which goes and transcends just their interaction with us in our offices. We've been undertaking registration and protection for many years now. And it has, though, become evident that protection and that proof of identity needs to go well beyond just their interactions with us when we're face-to-face. And we've found that oftentimes identity being an asset isn't something that was possible. Identity wasn't provable in situations when it mattered the most. And in one country, in fact in this region, we found that there was a real problem with identity document fraud. where people would be arriving and presenting identities, false identities, which had advanced security features, matching and sometimes even exceeding our own document security features in the past. So having somebody trying to have trust in the credentials that people were presenting was a real challenge for our refugee community. So for that reason, we looked a few years ago now at providing a new generation of verifiable credential. So we started to print a static QR code on our plastic ID cards, which were issued to refugees, which would then display, would be digitally signed by UNHCR and then display the same information that was on the other side of the QR code. So in a very simple way, our refugee population could prove that the card that they were holding was signed by us, and that the name and date of birth and was indeed the same as was claimed on the other side of the card. It's been well received, our implementation, and it's now in place across around 40 countries worldwide. But it still comes with challenges. And I spoke already about us wanting to make sure that identity is an asset. And so for us, we are ever wanting to increase the acceptance of our ID credentials and the interoperability with other states as well. So anything we can do in that regard to make the data that we anchor and that we rely on be more acceptable and promote inclusion for the people we support, we really support. And I think that's where Claim 169 comes in.
Thanks, Sam. Let's go with Nirav. With the challenges Sam has mentioned, could you please tell us how can Claim 169 QR enabled will be interoperable across digital identity ecosystems and across different nations?
Yeah, thanks, Taheer. So just I'll summarize what Sam said in terms of the static QR code and some of the challenges. So obviously low level of assurance, lack of security features. So with some of these challenges, we have to understand that what is the need first for interoperability. See, every country has their own sort of identity system which has been working now for decades. Now the need for interoperability comes with the context of the world currently. Refugee crisis, one of them. Even if you don't take refugee crisis, think of certain use cases where people want to move across countries, especially in the context of, let's say, Africa, where you have families which are spread out across the different borders and they want to go and meet their families. Or, for example, for employment, because there are certain troubled areas and people are moving across countries for searching of livelihood or employment opportunities. Healthcare, certain parts of the world don't have access to quality healthcare and people need to move across. In that case, identity becomes very important. So, given this context, interoperability in identity systems is really important. Having said that, there are challenges when it comes to creating identity systems across different countries with the different regulations, with the different technology standards, with the upgradation of technology. This is where exactly something like a Claim 169 comes in handy, because you don't need to have a high level of maturity, but at the same time you have something which addresses some of these challenges because it has a low resolution image in the data format, so you can do real-time validation. At the same time, the standards are easily acceptable for across the various countries. So this is where Claim 69 can really be a good solution in order to ensure interoperability amongst the nations for some of the use cases that I mentioned.
Hey, thanks, Nirav. So it's a great advantage, right? Having an interoperability across the border for the border operations and all, right? Moving people from one border to another border. With these advantages, Ameya, so as Nirav has mentioned about many advantages and all, right? Having this Claim 169, as you have done some implementations using Claim 169 in Ethiopia, could you please tell us like what you have done, and can you share your learnings and how you have evolved, right, to like make the data size smaller or optimize when we are generating the QR code?
Yeah, Taheer. So it's an interesting use case. I think a lot of you might be knowing that we have been involved in the Ethiopia project since 2019, building their foundational system. So apart from the biometric matching, that they have used, which is integrated with the MOSIP platform. Last year, we had a very interesting discussion where they said they have a set of credentials that are already being issued for a pilot implementation, right, where a physical ID card was being printed with a QR code, but then they were having challenges of fitting in an amount of data in the specified size that was there. And when they came to us, we said there are multiple ways of doing it. And coincidentally, I think around the same time, we had the working group discussions that were going on with MOSIP. So we took the advantage of what we were discussing in the working group, where we evolved to a stage that we brought the claim 169 in a format that you can store multi-biometric data. I think the common perception is we can always store a facial image in it, but to get the facial image compressed in a format that once you encode it into a container like a QR code or any other container, the capability to print it, to scan it, and still be able to identify that compressed image, that was a challenge. The other thing that we also faced is how do you ensure that apart from face, if any country wants to adopt the claim 169 in the future to store additional data, could be multi-biometric, could be additional biographic data, could be any proprietary data that the country might want to include into it. We had a look at that, and we were able to design a nicely packaged format, which then we subsequently adopted for the Ethiopia FIDA project. And it just doesn't stop at designing a claim, right? You have to be able to package it in a way. So since they were already printing QR codes on the cards, they obviously their preference was how can we package it in a QR code. And since QR code come in various different sizes, we wanted to get them an optimal size with the error correction in such a way that when you print it on the existing design that they had, they could also scan it and read it efficiently. But at the same time, go a step further, and I think we'll come to that in our discussion overall on how can you then use it for verification use cases in the future, right? Like you mentioned about cross-border use cases, there typically you may not have an internet connection. So to sum it up, it involved not just giving them a data format, but also a platform that allowed them to consume whatever they are currently registering in their FIDA system, encode it in a claim 169, and then reproduce it in the form of a QR code.
Hey, that was nice, Ameya, about this. Coming to you, Sam. So Ameya has briefed about the implementation things, what he has done. Could you please tell us how Claim 169 based QR code standards has a potential to ensure, so could you please tell us why do you think there should be an ability to have a future for offline verification and why it is so important?
Thanks. Yes, offline for us, in all of the contexts in which we work, is incredibly important. I was reviewing some statistics before this panel, and I can tell you that at least 16 countries that we work with issue documents while offline, 6 of which issue more than half of their documents in offline settings. And when it comes to verification and authentication, the number is significantly higher again. So in excess of 30 countries are reliant on doing verification in offline settings. And really for us, verification and authentication services are the true business of what we do on a day-to-day basis in field environments. And so being able to assess and verify somebody with the high level of assurance in situations where infrastructure is often quite difficult to achieve is of the utmost importance. At UNHCR, we often work in emergency settings, having to rapidly respond to crises, but also we work in protracted settings. And even in those settings where we've been in operation for decades now, infrastructure is difficult to achieve. And so anything we can do to make that verification process more seamless, quicker, more trustworthy, and let our staff focus on the important work of doing their protection case management without having to spend time doing manual verification, for us is an absolute win. So anything we can do to bring in offline verification with ease just adds scalability, it adds flexibility, and it really gets over some of the challenges we have in deploying infrastructure and equipment to these large-scale displacement situations. Ultimately, though, going beyond our use as well, going back to my earlier point, we want to make identity an asset, right? And it doesn't, and the identities that we provide and issue from UNHCR shouldn't just be recognizable by us in situations where a party can contact us. And so we want to make sure that the offline verification model works without needing to connect to, in our case, UNHCR. So anything, again, we can do to make use of the trust that's inherent in that credential without having to have a connection back to UNHCR, again, is a real bonus and something that's incredibly important, at least where we work.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So, Nirav, so Sam has mentioned about the importance of, an offline verification. So how do you think, right, CLIMB 169 based QR codes has the standard, the potential to ensure the level of assurance in identity verification system? And what are the advancements we can anticipate in QR code based identification verification system in the future?
So yeah, I think great question. Okay, one is, I've always, PwC started working with MOSIP even before, it was still in concept stages, Morocco. So Morocco is where we partnered together. So, one is that we have seen the entire journey of evolution of MOSIP and how it is always, trying to keep itself relevant. So, earlier I spoke about why, Claim 169 as an evolved version of a static, QR having the additional features, solves some of, the use cases that we spoke about. What I see potentially for the future is, basically how certain additional biometric, data can be embedded into the QR. For example, voice or, palm, etc. And obviously, with capturing, it in a smaller size format. Second, country-specific, data fields, which are, on the functional side, can be thought about. For example, in many countries, the head of the family is very important, when it comes to identity of the family. So, maybe such kind of data fields on the functional side, those could be added. So, basically, we are looking at something which, can be, done where selectively you can choose what kind of biometric and what kind of functional data fields are there. Even for that matter, when it comes to selective disclosure. So, if somebody wants to do, even out of the data set which is available, I don't want to disclose all my data. And, only I want to selectively disclose some part of the data. How can, Claim 169 enable those features where I don't have to share, everything. So, I think these are some of the advancements that we can look at to solve some of the practical challenges.
Yeah. Thanks, Nirav. So, the important point what Nirav has mentioned is, yes, it has an advantage, right? So when we are working with the working group, so we thought about including of as much biometrics as we can, because there are some countries who already has the biometrics with them. What if they want to actually include not only just the photo which is there, so they can use any biometrics. So we have given in the standard, like, they can use any biometrics if they want, and they can extend it in whatever fashion they want. Right? It's always open for the extension, whatever the standards which we have created now. So with this, Ameya, so as the important, extendability and the verification process which, Nirav has explained. So in the implementation, what you have done, what are the considerations you have adopted for offline verification using this CLIMB 169 QR codes?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, right? Because when we talk about digital IDs, it's not just about creating digital IDs and keeping them forever in a database, right? Today countries have realized that if you really want to achieve digital transformation at scale, you have to link digital IDs to benefit programs, to KYC, and that's where the verification aspect comes in. I'll just take a slight detour and come back to your point, right? When you talk about including multi-biometric data, there is always a challenge of how much size you have, right, to fit in the data. So it completely depends on the country. It's a trade-off between size and amount of data that you want to include. But what we personally believe is facial biometrics, at least one facial image should be there. For two reasons. One is when you scan the code, you can visually verify it. Even though it's a compressed image, it still allows you to look at the person and visually verify. And I think inherently the industry, the way it has developed is we are used to looking at ID cards with a photo on it. So we definitely mandate that a facial image should be there. Now, depending on the country, if you want to include fingerprint biometrics or say iris or voice, you have to take into consideration the usability of that particular biometric modality. For example, if you are going to encode an iris template into the code, you need to ensure that on the other side, when you verify it, you need to have an iris capture device. Today, technology has advanced where fingerprint capture and facial capture is both available on mobile devices. So the ease of use, whether it's an agent-based model or a self-service model, is already out there. Voice is another modality which could be provisioned, and with voice liveness algorithms coming up, which are pretty robust, I think that adds a multimodal capability into the code. But coming to specifically Ethiopia, I think at this stage they have decided to go ahead with a compressed face. We have used a WebP, which is again an open format for compression. We have got really good results. Of course, it needs some kind of tuning to that specific data set, because you can't just use an algorithm and then expect every single image to behave the same way. So there is an optimization that is required. And once the facial compressed image gets provisioned in, on the other side, whether they are linking it to a cross-border use case or whether they are trying to link it to their benefits program, whether it's a UNICEF program or Save the Children or some of these programs that they're running, they need a biometric matching algorithm on the other side after they scan it, right? So we have been able to give them an optimized version of an open source facial matching algorithm, which is what was their need. As they advance into their program, there are enough vendors out there, right? So I believe it will end up in a public-private partnership, while the government might implement a version of Claim 169 as it is today. But eventually, when you talk about verification, they will have to collaborate with the vendors. Like you have a fingerprint acquisition device for authentication, and then you go ahead and match it online. In a Claim 169 scenario, you could decide to do a fully offline-based authentication using a facial matching algorithm in a cross-border scenario where you may not have an internet, and thereby bring in inclusivity. Or you could send the data online wherever you have the connectivity and perform the matching online. Yeah, so when I talk, or when we look at digital public infrastructure, I would say we would probably add another I to it and say digital public inclusive infrastructure.
Inclusive infrastructure, yeah. Hey, that was great answer, Ameya. So with that, we are ready to take the questions from the audience, if we have any. This one.
You mentioned that this can be used to include any biometrics. Does that include iris, fingerprints? Because I think their footprint is large. And if I am correct, then the size of the QR code itself limits the data that can be transmitted.
Anybody want to answer?
Yeah, so you can absolutely include biometrics. Again, like it depends on the country. With ISO fingerprint templates, you obviously do not include images in the code, right? You would implement either a binary representation with removing the headers, so you can make it a basic ISO template. So then you get a very, very low footprint. I would say it won't go beyond, say, 100 bytes of data for one single fingerprint. With WebP, we have been able to achieve a compression rate that could give you somewhere between 800 to 1,000 bytes of a facial image, which can then be used for performing biometric authentication, right, by using face or fingerprint. Voice is another one which is evolving, so it really depends on how much data you want to put in. And I think one other consideration is if it depends on the maturity of the country where they are right now. If they're already issuing ID cards and they want to ensure that the Claim 169 becomes interoperable, and at some point in time it looks similar to the ID cards that they have right now with a QR code on it, you can encode all of that data in a QR code. If a country is on a journey where they are saying ID cards are fine, but I'm going to now launch a digital wallet and then have the Claim 169 issued in a QR code format in the wallet, then you can of course package in more data because it's in a digital format and it renders very nicely on the screen.
And what is the quality of the verifications that do you get the similar quality that you with the normal biometric devices? Is it less? How much trust you can have in that?
So I think you asked two different questions. One is the accuracy of biometric matching and how much can you trust, right? So trust is established when you encode data in it and the issuer signs the data, right? So when you're scanning it, you're actually verifying the signature. So that establishes trust. You could go a step further and encrypt it. But as you can imagine, right, as I start putting more and more data, including encryption, it increases the payload. So while there are technologies out there that can still issue codes which are non-standard codes, if the country wants to go with it, if you are going with a PDF 417 or a standard-based QR code, you have to take a call of how much data can you put inside it. Yeah.
So I'll extend the answer for the first question, right? We have provisioned for all the biometrics and all. So still it's the option to the countries, right? They can pick and choose which biometrics to be included and all. It's not like, they are all the biometrics they are trying to include. Definitely, there are limitations on the QR code and all. So still the country has to decide, which biometrics they want to actually include, right? Whether it's a face or it's fingerprints, right? As Ameya has mentioned, right? If we are using the templates and all those things, it's huge, reduces the size of that particular, biometric which we have captured, which can be easily used for, authentication and verification of the identity data, what they are carrying.
So yeah, I'm just going to add one more point.
Yes.
So, the way you can think about it is actually depending on the use case. So, I'm a strong believer that identity is not just for, keeping in the database, but the use case. Now, if you look at the use cases for interoperability, okay, now I'll give you an example. We are working on a project with the the Western African states, the Economic Commission for the Western African states, where each country is in a different stage in its national identity program. Right? You can so some have enrollment, some have the application which is ready, etc., etc. But the use case for people moving across these borders is real as of today, right? So are we going to wait for all countries to reach a certain maturity when it comes to their biometric enrollment and etc., etc., or we do find somewhere like a light solution which can become sort of in between, plug the gap, while the countries continue on their journey, but enable interoperability. So which is where some of the examples which Ameya mentioned on offline, which is critical, the standards being applied across the different countries. I think this claim 169 sort of a model becomes really useful when it comes to focusing on interoperability. While the country continues on its journey, they can think of moving towards the digital wallet, SSID, or a federated system, or a full-fledged centralized system. So I think this is where I feel it's horses for courses sort of answers.
Any more questions?
I've got a question for Sam. So UNHCR is one of those organizations that you deal with a lot of beneficiaries across many, many, many countries. At the same time, I assume that data is primarily consumed within the UNHCR organization, and in respect of privacy of beneficiaries and refugees, you would not easily share that with the government, apart from some exceptional use cases, I guess. So how important is interoperability of data for you, if somebody could say, well, in essence, UNHCR is working with a closed loop system?
Great question. So I think it's important to clarify UNHCR really works with and for states, and oftentimes our processing activities are done side by side, shoulder to shoulder with the governments themselves. So no, we would not share data back with the refugee's country of origin, but working together with the country that's hosting the refugee is quite another matter. I think a great example for us is also the Ethiopia example of last year. And for us, we ran a huge interoperability project, at least for us, where we were pushing across the data that we held on almost 1 million refugees across to the Ethiopian government for them to be able to check and run against the national register as a prerequisite for the government then to issue a FIDO ID, which then got sent back across to us and printed on the refugee ID cards. So from our perspective in UNHCR, the sharing of data was a massive inclusionary step forward for all of the refugees in the country who suddenly had legal access to work, healthcare, education, And so often I think data sharing, especially when it comes to vulnerable communities and refugees, is seen as a bad thing or a scary thing. But really, I think that if done responsibly and within the right framework, especially when working with nation states that are co-responsible or primarily responsible for managing refugees, I think it can offer up huge opportunities, especially when it comes to inclusion and empowerment.
Thanks, Sam. Any more questions? We'll take the last question. Yes.
Hi. For existing, say, brownfield implementations that already have digital IDs, what is the change in capability that's needed at the point of authentication? Is it purely software to be able to use Claim 69 standard QR codes, or is there anything else that gets added as a requirement?
So if it's a brownfield, first of all, you need to look at the data, right, that you have, because I'll take the question from encoding side first, right? So if you have enough data with you to encode, you decide what you want to do it. Typically, it would be biographical data like name, date of birth, and all of these things, plus the biometrics, typically a facial image. And then on the authentication side, it could be any standard biometric devices like a capture camera, as long as you're able to read the Claim 169, the format that it is issued. You could use any facial camera, or if you're encoding fingerprints into it, you could use any of the fingerprint devices to match it, because you would anyway have ISO templates in it, right? So the interoperability is guaranteed in that. Now, how many templates do you provision will all depend upon what type of data you are, how much size do you have available if you want to print it. Typically, we would recommend to have at least 2 fingerprints, one of left and one of right. And that is, I think, good enough for a multi-biometric scenario. It also depends on the level of assurance of that transaction that you're doing, right? It depends on what are you actually passing on to the beneficiary, right? If it's a financial transaction, you want a higher level of assurance. Yeah. So you might pair it with a face plus OTP or face plus finger, and you could use any standard biometric devices or go for innovative technologies like contactless capture.
We'll take the last question from this side.
Hi, my question is to Sam, and other panelists can also add, but Sam, can you talk about the challenges that you faced during offline verifications, especially in the areas where there is no great connectivity for the refugees?
Sure. Great question. Thank you. So today, a lot of our work when we're, say, giving out monthly food distributions or cash distributions is done in refugee camp settings or difficult to reach locations. And in those, and those are principally the situations I'm talking about when I mention offline verification for us. And so in each of those settings at the moment, we're rolling out our normal biometric kits along with field servers and the power and the generators that go with those. And oftentimes we're needing to pre-synchronize identity data to locally held servers. And the system works. It's done exceedingly well over the last decade. However, as I mentioned before, it's not without challenge. So I think there's a real opportunity for us where we've already anchored the data and printed it onto a trusted source of identity that can be held by the refugee, for them to be able to present that and us to make a much more light touch, easily scalable, easily deployable approach for routine identity verifications. And again, when we're looking to work more with a greater set of partners, then giving them that ability to verify to that same level of assurance using a credential that's been issued by us is a real benefit for the future.
Okay, we're running out of time. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Nirav. Thanks, Ameya, for joining this discussion. So the panel is available for the next 2 days. If you have any more questions, you can reach out to them. They will be around here only, right? To understand more about the Claim 169. Thanks, guys. Thanks everyone for joining this session.
Thank you.